that we call Indigenous and it's the birthing waters. It's a nursery for the salmon on the Fraser River watershed. This is one of the greatest lakes in our territory, and it felt like a death, as it was experienced as a death in our community when this happened. And we are coming up to 4 years now, and just this process of grieving that you can feel, this connection with the land, the grieving. The gold rush in our territory started in approximately 1858. It peaked in our Secwepemc territory in 1862, 1863, and that's when we had the greatest episodes of the smallpox, which wiped out over 90% in our territories. When the Mount Polley mine disaster happened, when the tailings came down the mountain, it wiped out 4 ancestral villages in the area, so we lost those villages twice to 2 different gold rushes. The gold rushes are still happening in our territories, and the Mount Polley mine disaster is not over. There are deep colonial roots in British Columbia based on gold mining that continue today. And British Columbia, Vancouver is one of the mining centers on the planet. Mining companies register in Vancouver and in British Columbia. They are on the Toronto Stock Exchange in Canada because mining is, in British Columbia especially, regarded as the highest law of the land. It's considered the highest use of the land by the colonial governments. And so mining companies have reign on the land. There's a free entry system where you can basically just go online, and with a credit card you can stake mining claims, mineral claims, without even having to go there, which means that people all over the world can stake parts of our territory. Most of British Columbia is still unceded territory, sovereign territories, Indigenous peoples, and this is something that we've been dealing with since the time of the gold rush, over 150 years. British Columbia is often described as a Wild West situation. Right now, we have members, our relatives, who are fighting a big mine, Taseko Mines, who are trying to develop a huge gold mine in the Tsalhqot'in territory. The Tsalhqot'in people just recently, or in 2014, won a title case, the first one recognized in Canada. They're still fighting this mine after beating them twice in 2 federal panels. They're still fighting them for exploration drill permits in their territory. So you have this system that is basically so centered on gold in our territory that it will, basically the company said, as long as that gold is in that ground, we will always be coming after it. And so what we have to do is we have to shift these values around gold. And the same area where the gold is in all of our territories are vast amounts of fresh water. Where the Mount Polley mine disaster happened, in the Yukon-Senkanmekwa, where we have our nursery for the salmon, that lake is still drawn on for fresh water. The mine is continuously dumping into that lake still, and they're actually now starting to dump into groundwater. So they're now dumping into the aquifer, which can't be monitored. So these are the things that we're trying to raise awareness around. And I wanted to just kind of set that stage for you, but I kind of wanted to talk more about what we're doing in response to all of this. So we've got this biggest mining disaster. Canada's never really acknowledged it at all in our territory. The company has never apologized. And basically what they've said is, oh, it's just similar to an avalanche. We get those all the time. And it's like, no, this is very, very different from an avalanche. The government and company response from the beginning has been to completely downplay and minimize and dismiss all of our concerns. And this is the same everywhere. It's the same story. Much of what you were saying, Candace, it's the same story with us, but it's gold in our territory. And so what I've been seeing, though, is that in our communities that I've been to, there's this spirit rising. That's why we're here, the spirit that's rising from the land itself. And in Nukhalk territory, where I'm from, there's a story about Kamites. And Kamites was a feminine deity who was called upon by Creator to take care of these giants that were roaming the earth before the time of humans. And they were upsetting everything. They were greedy, and they were destructive, and they were violent. And Kamites was called upon to right this imbalance. And so Kamites had a big club, and she had a big wide-brimmed cedar hat, and on the inside of the cedar hat it was dark and filled with stars. And she went out and she started slaying these giants who were putting everything out of order. And we see this spirit rising up in our young women. We see this spirit rising up in the men who uphold them in our territories. And they're learning. And I'm the first generation in my family who didn't go to residential school. And the generations younger than me are stronger. They're quick, they're really hungry for the language, they're hungry for the ceremonies, they're hungry for the land, and that's what we need to be feeding them to strengthen them for this. Because I always tell people that this is life work, and what happens in our territories is the inheritance of our children. It becomes part of their bloodline. The Mount Polley mine disaster is now in the genetic code of our children. It's in their responsibilities, and we have to be ensuring that they have the strength and the teachings from the language and the culture to deal with this. And as long as that gold is in the land, as long as that uranium's in the land, they're going to be coming after it, and we have to shift those values. So some of the things that we've been working on in our territories is we're really looking at diversified tactics. We need people doing all different kinds of things. We need people on the front lines doing direct action. We need people working with the legal systems. We need people working grassroots organizing in our communities. We need people on media. We need all of these things. And one of the things that has been happening in Secwepemc Uluk, there was a proposed mine called the New Ajax mine, and two local First Nations there, the Kamloops de Secwepemc, it's the Kamloops, Tecumloops, and the Skitcheston bands, did their own environmental assessment because they didn't trust in the British Columbia and Canadian assessments. And so what they did was they organized based on traditional governance structures, and they had representatives from all of the different families come forward and listen to all of the information, all of the professional reports, but they also pulled in all of their traditional stories, all of the knowledge, local knowledge from the elders. They pulled everything together to understand what the impacts would be, because companies will always tell you what the benefits are, but they won't tell you what the impacts are. And through their process, they ended up rejecting this mine. In a previous process, they approved a mine. So it's not that they're against all mining, but for this particular project, they said no. And amazingly, the government of British Columbia upheld this decision. And so we're looking at different models of, kind of combining different things, traditional knowledge, traditional science, with these modern systems, and trying to find the cracks in each of these systems of where we can get in and put our own knowledge and our power. So we need to connect our work, and we need to, the same values, whether you're talking about mining or you're talking about pipelines or fish farms or dams, it's the same work, but you're working on different fronts. And what I've been seeing in British Columbia, where I'm from Secwepemc Uluk, where I'm from, is that we need to be talking to each other across these different fronts. And so gatherings like this are really important to understand what the key issues are in all of the different pieces, because it's the same work. It's all for our common future. So, where I'm from, protecting water has always been the bottom line, and salmon is a way of life. Recently in March, there was a gathering near here in the Tulalip area, and there was a water protection declaration that was signed, and there were a lot of different people who were there. And so the work that we're trying to do is really connect networks together. We all have different networks. If we can connect those networks together, that really helps to share the information. And right today I'm wearing this No Pebble Mine t-shirt, and folks from Bristol Bay, that's a nod to them. But it's also understanding that the same company who wants to develop a huge gold mine in Bristol Bay is the same company who wants to develop a tungsten mine in Wolastoq Territory in New Brunswick, is the same mine that's in court right now with the Talquatine people for this new proposed gold mine. It's the same company that operates in Secwepemc Uluk at the Gibraltar mine. These are all the same companies, they're the same people operating under different names. And one thing that we have found is that they will find an Indigenous name for the area and name that their company name so that it looks like they have obtained consent. Or they will find a big family name in an area, and they'll name that the name of their company, so it looks like that family is behind that consent. So these are some of the tactics that they use in our communities. And one of the things that we're trying to, I talk about these diversified tactics, is looking at, we have a short game and we have a long game. Right now we've got mines operating in our territory. What are we going to do about those? We can't just shut them down. They're too entrenched within this system that we're in. So some of the things that we're looking at are international standards. One is called the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance. The acronym is IRMA, and they just launched, and that's something that we're using as a tool for communities to sign up, to pressure companies in their territory to sign up for this. So it's IRMA, IRMA. You can go to Responsible Mining, I think it's .net, for more information on that. But there's this new map, and there are companies, some of the biggest steel production companies. Microsoft is part of it, Tiffany's. So like all of these different companies that and purchasers and communities, and when a mining company signs up for this program, it's basically to bring them, clean up their practices to a higher standard, but it's verified, third-party verified. So if a company says, like in our territory, we have an excellent relationship with First Nations, the First Nations have to verify that that's true. So this is a way of kind of keeping some checks and balances on it in the immediate game. But really, we need to change this long-term values. The long plan is to change these long-term values and shift the highest standard, the highest value to water. And one of the ways we can do that is in our language. We have to stop referring to the gold standard. Treat them like gold. We have to understand that gold is a dirty, destructive thing. And if people can stop buying gold, just stop buying gold. If you can get people to just do that and know that over 90% of what comes out of a gold mine is waste. So mining operations are mostly waste storage facilities, and the waste will be there forever. The impacts will be forever. It never goes away. It can never truly heal. And so when we're thinking about mining, I think the biggest thing that we need to understand is that we have to learn how to manage our waste, which means we have to manage our consumption. So when we're thinking about buying something new, is it a need or is it a want? And each of us has that power to do that. Each of us has the power to share that mining is one of the biggest threats to water that a lot of people don't realize. And so if we can combine our work around all of the different things that we're doing around to protect water, to understand that mining is a big piece of that game, then we'll be further ahead. And so I call on everybody to really embrace this spirit of Kamites, the spirit of the land itself coming up, and to nurture that in our children. And I hold my hands up to all of you who are doing such amazing work and who are all here, and it's really an honor to be here. Thank you. Kuksana.